Fortunate that we happened to invite Swami Nishpapananda here before we knew about this big weekend. And it worked out so perfectly. We're really happy that he could come. Most of you know him. He has been at the St. Louis Center for decades. Even before joining as a college student, he stayed there in the early 70s, had the privilege of being with Swami Satprakashanandaji for many years. And is one of the very dear, close friends of myself and the center. So I'm very happy that he could be here. He will be speaking on Source of Strength.
So you notice when Swami Sarvadevanandaji spoke this morning, he came up with this little sheet of paper that had a few notes of it on it. See, I'm a different kind of speaker here. Reams of paper. Swami B and I are developing a close friendship. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityo ma amritam kamaya, avirabhirma eti, rudrayate dakshinamukam, enamam pahinityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the ever-changing to the unchanging. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through, and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Peace, peace. So, yesterday, Swami Atmajnananda mentioned that on the way out here to establish a center in Washington, D.C., he and Travis stopped in St. Louis. They spent the night in Kansas City and then crossed the state of Missouri, had lunch with us, and went on their way. Well, a little before that, Swami Atmarupananda had come out and spent the night with us. He was traveling with Eddie from Trabuco with a similarly large rental truck to establish a center there. And as of last night, Swami Atmarupananda and Swami Atmajnananda are the first of our Swamis born in the West to be in charge officially of affiliated Vedanta centers. And I couldn't be happier. Huh? You can draw your own conclusions. So, and then also I should mention that Swami Sarvadevanandaji, early on when he came to this country, would occasionally come to St. Louis in the winter at Swami Chaitananda's request and spend a little more than a week. He'd do 2 Sunday lectures, 2 classes, and then on his off days he'd go to Kansas City, do a couple of programs, and come back for the last Sunday lecture. And it gave me an opportunity to just be around him. And now it's not so easy to do that. He's too busy to do those sort of outings in St. Louis. And I'm very happy that this worked out so that I could spend some time with him as well. And you, of course. More and more of you as time passes. So the topic today is the source of strength. Strength is the quality or state of being strong, bodily or muscular power, vigor. Strength is mental power, force or vigor. Strength is moral power, firmness or courage. These are the first 3 definitions of strength in the Webster's Unabridged Dictionary: physical, mental, and moral strength. These relate to the individual, distinguishing, and then the next part is distinguishing strength from its synonyms. It is defined like this: strength is the inherent capacity to manifest energy, the inherent capacity to endure, and the inherent capacity to resist. And this definition also applies to collective strength, the inherent capacity to manifest energy, to endure, and to resist. Out of 13 definitions of strength, none of them dealt with spiritual strength. But that's our topic. We'll discuss collective strength in the form of civilizational strength and individual strength. We'll take civilizational strength first. And both of these are from the perspective of Swami Vivekananda. Now, what is the source of strength with respect to civilization? And why are we going to Swami Vivekananda? You might say Vivekananda spoke to the world 130 years ago, 135 years ago. Isn't that passé? But towards the end of his days, in conversation with Swami Premananda, he said, I've given enough for thinking humanity for the next 1,500 years. We're just at the beginning. And the qualifier for thinking humanity is important. He gave the general principles. He sowed the seeds. We have to figure out how to apply those principles in our particular circumstances, water the seeds, and grow. So I've taken some things from his complete works related to civilization and its strength and sequenced them in a way that gives an idea of his perspective. The more advanced a society or nation is in spirituality, the more civilized is that society or nation. No nation can said to have become civilized only because it has succeeded in increasing the comforts of material life by bringing into use lots of machinery and things of that sort. I think, as an extension, computers would also fit into that category. A nation may conquer the waves, control the elements, develop the utilitarian problems of life seemingly to the utmost limits, and yet not realize that in the individual, the highest type of civilization is found in that person who has learned to conquer self. Civilization, true civilization, should mean the power of taking the animal man out of his sense life by giving him visions and tastes of planes much higher, not an external comfort. He spoke at Harvard University on Vedanta philosophy, mostly to the philosophy students and teachers, but others from the liberal arts were there. And there was an extensive question and answer session afterwards. One of the questions was this: what is the Vedantic idea of civilization? Swamiji said, you are philosophers, and you don't think that a bag of gold makes the difference between one person and another. What is the value of all these machines and sciences? There's only one result. They spread knowledge. But you haven't solved the problem of need, but only made that need keener. Machines don't solve the poverty question. They simply make people struggle more. Competition gets keener. And then he switches gears. He goes back from the machinery. What's the value of nature itself? Why do you go and build a monument to a man who sends electricity through a wire? Doesn't nature do that millions of times over every time she sends a thunderbolt down? Is not everything already existing in nature, Prakriti? What is the value of your getting it? It's already there. The only value is that it makes for this material development. And then he switches gears again. This universe is simply a gymnasium in which the soul is taking exercises. And after these exercises, we become gods. So the value of everything is to be decided by how far it is a manifestation of divinity. The value of everything is to be decided by how far it manifests divinity. And then he answers the question. Is that he'd do this. First, he'd knock the conventional wisdom of the West directly in the head, and then he'd give his answer. Civilization is the manifestation of that divinity in humanity, which is very similar to his definition of religion. Religion is the manifestation of the divinity already in man. Now, man means everybody. He didn't, people didn't speak the same way that we do now, so I can't update this on the fly. Religion is the manifestation of the divinity already in human beings. And also very similar to his definition of education, the manifestation of the perfection already in human beings. Now, what happens when a civilization does not recognize that, quote, the highest type of civilization is found in the person who has learned to conquer self? And this is from Swamiji's message, talk in Lahore, the common bases of Hinduism in 1897, after he came back from the West. Let them talk of India's regeneration all they like. Let me tell you, as one who has been working, or at least trying to work for that, all my life, that there is no regeneration for India until you be spiritual. Not only so, but upon it depends the welfare of the entire world. The mightiest buildings, if built upon the loose sand foundations of materialism, must come to grief one day, must totter to their destruction someday. And the history of the world is our witness. Nation after nation has arisen, basing its greatness upon materialism, declaring that human beings are all matter. All such civilizations as have been based upon such sand foundations as material comfort and all that have disappeared one after another after short lives on the face of the earth. A materialistic civilization, once dashed down, can never come up again. That building, once thrown down, is broken to pieces once and for all. And the religions, and that's the end of the quotation, but as a corollary, the religions of those civilizations that have been dashed down become the mythologies of the civilizations that follow. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the mythology of the Vikings, and so forth. Civilization is the manifestation of divinity in human beings. Summing it up, that culture that recognizes that the highest type of civilization is found in the person who has learned to conquer self, the rishi, the saint, and that honors and can foster the development of such men and women of the most exalted character, that culture can come back when it's thrown down. That culture will have the strength to regenerate. This is the history of India, and to some extent, the history of China and Japan. How many times has India been thrown down? Conquered by Buddhism, conquered by Islam, conquered by Christianity. Each time comes back. Vivekananda said in one of his talks in the West, and I wasn't able to find the exact quote, he gave a number. If a country has, I don't know whether it was 50 or 100 men and women who have realized God, that country is safe. He mentioned sand foundations. In the West, and he's even carried it over into his talks in India. When he talked about the Vedas, he was translating the Vedas into English. He'd use biblical English. It sounded like the King James Version, you know. Hear ye, O ye children of immortal bliss, ye that dwell on earth. He's a genius with this sort of thing. The people would understand that it's scripture. And here he talks about sand foundations, and it reminds us of Christ in the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Very similar. Everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded, it had been built on a rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act upon them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall. Christ, in this message, is directing it at the individual rather than civilization. Swamiji is talking about the collective of individuals in civilization. It's the same message and pretty much the same language. Now let's go to strength with respect to individuals. Strength is the one thing a person needs more than anything. We can't talk, move, hear, or think without it. Strength is at the back of all physical action, all operations of the senses, all functioning of the mind. We need strength, physical, intellectual, moral, and spiritual. All our excellences in different planes of life are due to strength. We're healthy due to physical strength, highly intellectual, or strong because we're mentally strong, morally good because of inner purity, spiritually enlightened because of spiritual strength. Similarly, all the problems of life are due to weakness. We're sick because of being physically weak, dull-headed because we're intellectually weak, wicked or depraved because of moral weakness, worldly-minded because we're too attached to these changing things that compose our world of experience, lacking the power to distinguish between what is temporary and what is eternal, between what is apparent and what is real, between the relative and the absolute. We become attached to what is changing. And so our lack of spiritual enlightenment is due to this weakness, due to our attachment to the changing. So Vivekananda says all our excellences can be summed up in one word: strength. Intellectual strength is superior to physical strength. Strength is not in the gross, but in the fine. If I lift a weight, my muscles work, and it looks like the muscles are very strong, and they may be. But what supports the muscles? The nerves. Very delicate nerves support these powerful muscles. And behind the nerves are the thoughts and emotions that control them. Years ago, I was in Seattle when Swami Bhaskarananda was giving a talk, a Sunday talk, and he says, I have a power which I'm about to demonstrate for you. He says, I can move 160 pounds just with my thought. Okay. So, we don't think about it, but yeah, we're doing this all the time. It's the thoughts that control the body. And if we're emotionally upset, we can't do anything. Arjuna sunk down in the chariot. I will not fight. He's emotionally drained. He's confused. See? Muscles of iron, nerves of steel, trained as the consummate warrior, can't lift his bow. Behind the nerves are the emotions, and it's the thoughts that control the gross world. Whatever we create in this world means the manifestation of an inner idea. So, I just want to put this kind of in a typical American context. Years ago, I would be out and about quite a bit doing various things for the St. Louis Center, and often driving back for lunch while the program was on NPR called Fresh Air. It interviews different people. Usually they're selling something, a book or a movie or music or something, but interesting people and a good interviewer. And this day, they happened to be interviewing Hal Sutton, who was the consummate Hollywood stuntman. He'd been a paratrooper in World War II and relocated to Los Angeles and was trimming trees when a friend of his came and said, who was also a former paratrooper, he said, Hal, I'm trying to get in the movie business as a stuntman. And I got a job with this television show, Have Gun Will Travel, and I need someone else on this. Do you suppose you got any time off? Can you help me with that? He says, all you have to do is fall off a horse or something. So he did, and that went pretty well. And it's about the same size as the star of the show, so Richard Boone came up to him. He says, we got another stunt that needs to be done. You think you can do it? Well, what is it? Well, you have to jump from a rock onto the top of a moving stagecoach. Okay. How high is the rock? Well, 30 feet. Oh, I think I can do that. They train you to jump, as a paratrooper, jump off with something 25 feet high and not hurt yourself. So, yeah, I think I can do that. Do you want to have a run-through tomorrow? Sure. So he gets up on the rock. Stagecoach comes by about 30 miles an hour, and he looks down there. The top of this stagecoach looks like a postage stamp. What have I gotten myself into? Anyway, he did it. He jumped. He landed smack dab where he should, right on the top of the stagecoach. Broke through the top of the stagecoach up to his armpits. And everyone inside was, I'm sure, charmed with his company. So the interviewer asked, well, how do you know when to jump? Well, you can't time it. I only saw one go through, but they're horses. They'll be moving at a different speed. You can't say, when the carriage gets to that bush, you jump. You can't time it. You just eyeball it. And at a certain point, you say, go, and you go. Well, this is the intellect speaking to the body. Go, go. Well, knowing that people die doing these stunts, how do you get the courage to do them? Well, in the course of his career, he broke 56 bones, several more than once. Broke his back twice. And he said, well, you have to look at the whole situation. You have to evaluate the risks very carefully. You have to do everything you can to mitigate the risk. You have to think of everything that could happen and what your capabilities are and what the requirements are. And at some point, you come to the conclusion, the buddhi, the intellect is operating. Yeah, I can do this. And you get your courage up and you do it. This will work, and you do it. So, This is the epitome of the can-do attitude in post-World War II America. Here's a farm boy from Tennessee with very little education, but he had this self-confidence. Yeah, I can do that. And he just faced one situation after another. Really charming man, and very simple. In order to do these things and survive, you can't fool yourself. Very simple guy. So it's the subtle that controls the gross in all of this. Thoughts control the body-mind complex. So physical courage is supported by intellectual strength, but what supports the mind? Now, this is the message of all religions, but it's not obvious. We may be intellectually strong, but if we're not morally strong, we won't be strong in the true sense. We won't have the right perspective on life. And without that perspective on life, we won't be able to proceed in a way that truly benefits us. Greater than intellectual strength is moral strength, and moral strength is what supports intellectual strength. We can't maintain our morale without being moral. Without morality supporting the intellect, we don't get the peace of mind, the calmness that supports insight. It becomes difficult to act in our own best interest and in the interest of others. A clever mind may be very intelligent, very well trained, very highly educated. But if it's not supported by morality, in this sense I mean dharma, it tends to get us into more complicated trouble. If it's not supported by dharma. It's virtue, goodness, dharma, that brightens intellect. Virtue meaning cultivating fellow feeling towards our fellow beings and overcoming negative feelings. That's as simple as it gets. It's a translation of dharma into English. So this moral life of a person supports one's real intellectual life. This moral strength is greater than intellectual strength. And spiritual strength is even greater than moral strength because spirituality is the basis of morality. Physical strength supported by intellectual strength supported rests on dharma, and dharma is supported by the spiritual strength of oneness, Advaita. The basic moral principle is selflessness. All vices spring from selfishness. All virtues rest on selflessness. And how do we cultivate it? How do we cultivate selflessness? There's a wonderful section in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, a whole chapter where he talks with Vidyasagar. Now, Vidyasagar, as most of you know, was a philanthropist. He was an educator. And Ramakrishna went to see him. If he heard someone, there was good and great quality, Krishna says in the Gita, whatever great and glorious thing you see anywhere has sprung up from but a spark of my splendor. So Ramakrishna, he hears some kind of greatness. Oh, let me meet that person. So they talked for many hours. And as was Ramakrishna's wont, he'd talk to these people. And mostly he did the talking in most cases. But towards the end of the conversation, he'd zero in on them. They talked about general things. He'd always zero in on this person. And he'd let them know, this is where you stand right now, and this is what you need to do. He did this with Pandit Shashadhar, he did that with Dr. Sharkar, and he did that with Vidyasagar. Vidyasagar means ocean of learning. He wasn't particularly religious, although he followed religious customs as a matter of the custom. And he helped people because he felt that if everyone behaved in this way, it would ameliorate the human condition. So he was more of what we'd call a humanist today. So Sri Ramakrishna is zeroing in on this great man that he's talking to. To Vidyasagar, these activities that you're engaged in are good. It's very good if you can perform them in a selfless spirit. This is karma yoga. Renouncing egotism, giving up the idea that you are the doer. Through such action, one develops love and devotion to God and ultimately realizes God. But by these philanthropic activities, you're really doing good to yourself. So when Swamiji told us this in the West, he was articulating Ramakrishna's idea. By these philanthropic activities, you're really doing good to yourself. If you can do them disinterestedly, your mind will become pure, and you will develop love of God. And as soon as you have that love of God, you'll realize God. And then he gets more personal. He said, there's gold buried in your heart, but you're not yet aware of it. It's covered now with a thin layer of clay. Once you're aware of it, all these activities of yours will lessen. Now, this struck me when I first read it as something profound. In the course of trying to relate the book teachings of Vedanta, related to the book teachings of Vedanta, it occurred to me that this is an original way of expressing them. To me, it seems like what he's saying, what Ramakrishna is saying, is that this layer of clay, which is the impurity of the mind, and which can be cleaned by karma yoga, by unselfish action, covers our awareness of the goal, which is the spiritual core. That spiritual core is the Atman, that manifests as loving consciousness. And it's the same in everyone. And being the same in everyone, it connects us, though we're unconscious of it. It connects us with each other and with every living being. So depending on the particular state of mind at any given time and our general state of mind, that is, how thick the layer of clay is that's covering the Atman, the gold in our heart. You know, Sri Ramakrishna had a wonderful advantage. He could see how thick the clay was. He could see how much ignorance was there and how much was left to do and give very clear instruction. So depending on our particular state of mind at any given time and on the general state of our mind, which is how much clay is covering that gold in our heart, how thick the clay is, we are all more or less unconsciously aware of our divinity, of that divine core within us. We're all more or less unconsciously aware of that divinity. Now, what does that mean? Even though we might not be aware of it, that core of complete selflessness unconsciously motivates us to goodness. And Ramakrishna is saying, you're waking up, keep doing it. Take the ego out of it. Don't aggrandize yourself. Do it selflessly. Uncover the gold. You'll develop love of God, and you'll realize God. Wonderful. Our relationship through common secular interest cannot make us selfless. Enlightened self-interest falls apart when our selfish interests go in different directions. It's political morality. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. When a person does any unselfish work in the true sense without any calculation or ulterior motive, she feels a spiritual relationship with the person she deals with, even though she may not be fully conscious of the underlying spiritual relationship that prompts goodness. Morality means the attunement of this individual self with the supreme self that underlies all, that dwells in all beings as the innermost self. You attune the individual self to the supreme self that dwells in all beings. This is the real sense of morality. And spirituality means the same thing. Instead of holding to each and every object of the world, instead of holding to the changing, you establish your relationship with the eternal, all-pervading, supreme self. The basic principle of spiritual life and moral life are the same. As spiritual life depends on finding our relationship with the supreme being that exists everywhere, our moral life depends on finding our relationship with the supreme self that dwells in the hearts of all. Again, Vivekananda in the West, he said, the infinite oneness of the soul, and here he means Atman, is the eternal sanction of all morality, that you and I are not only brothers. Every literature voicing our struggle towards freedom has preached that to you, but that you and I are one. This is the dictate of Indian philosophy. This oneness is the rationale of all ethics and spirituality. Now, when Vivekananda spoke in New York during his first visit to the West in 1895, he had huge audiences. And Swami Pavitrananda tracked down a lady that had listened to him in 1895, Lillian Montgomery, when she was 80 years old, I think, pretty old, and tape recorded her reminiscences. Very cultured, intelligent woman. And one of the things she said that really struck me with respect to Vivekananda, someone asked her, you know, you heard Vivekananda speak in 1895. She never met him. She never went backstage and say, I'm Lillian, and how do you do? And she just took it in. And she said, I heard Swami Vivekananda speak on Vedanta. I don't need to hear anyone else. Anyway, she said, Vivekananda's great power was that he perceived the divinity in all forms, and he perceived it so clearly that he awakened it in his listeners as he spoke. He was practicing this principle in a way that few can. Christ said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Why? Because your very self, your real self, the foundation of the ego, is the supreme self that dwells in all beings. So Christ, Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda are saying this. But this is indirect knowledge. It's verbal testimony from reliable sources. What is the evidence from common sense and common experience? Not enlightenment, not samadhi. What is the evidence from common experience and reason that spirit, that consciousness is the source of all strength? How do we know that strength is not actually in the physical body? How do we know that whatever strength is in the physical body is due to the radiance of the conscious spirit within? How is it demonstrated every day in our lives? Consciousness is not intrinsic in the body. The body is a physical object, and a physical entity does not have consciousness as its very essence. Consciousness does not belong to the senses either. Neither does it belong to the mind. It belongs to that which certifies the existence of the body, the mind, and the senses. During sleep or when we dream, consciousness recedes from the body. The prana, the life force, still functions. The body isn't dead. There's heat. The autonomic activities continue during sleep. And yet a person won't respond to external stimuli. Why? That also shows that consciousness is not in the body or the senses or even in the life principle. The life principle is functioning quite well, but the body does not respond. In dreams, the mind is still functioning, not in a normal way. Usually it's mostly imagination and emotion. We dream through the mind, yet even the mind does not have consciousness as its essence. During deep dreamless sleep, consciousness recedes from the mind as well. And what happens? The mind comes to a standstill. It's constantly restless, that's its nature, and it comes to a dead stop in deep sleep. All the functions of the mind stop. Why? Something's lacking. Something that is truly inherent in an object cannot be away from that object. But consciousness recedes from the mind. Consciousness does not belong to the mind, but the knower of the mind. That knower within is the luminous self, the Atman. That luminous self objectifies all activities of the mind. It objectifies through the senses all external objects, including the physical body. And this real self is the source of all strength. Because its radiance penetrates the mind apparently becomes conscious. The mind appears to be radiant because of the radiance of consciousness that actually belongs to the Atman. From the mind, that consciousness comes to the senses. Then the senses function. You wake up and perceive things. When the radiance of consciousness functions through the physical body, then only can we be aware of physical objects of the external world. It's the physical body that is responsible for our contact with the objective external universe. And the moment that consciousness recedes from the physical body, we lose all contact with the physical world. The world disappears. And we don't miss it during dream or deep sleep. So there's one source of consciousness, the pure self with a capital S. It is the one experience of our waking, dream, and deep sleep. That state of complete non-apprehension of the mind in deep sleep is witnessed by the conscious self. So when we wake up, we know, I did not know anything. We witness our knowledge and we witness our ignorance. The conscious self observes the state of the body, the senses, and the mind. In deep sleep, it knows, I do not know anything, and I had peace and joy. The mind becomes completely rested when it throws off the burden of the ego every night in deep sleep. There's no restlessness. We don't know who we are because all the identifications of the ego are pulled out from under us. And we feel that peace and joy, which is in our inherent nature. That is the glimmer of the gold in our hearts that we experience in the calm of deep sleep. And it's deep sleep that is the first stage of sleep to rebound after sleep deprivation, in sleep deprivation experiments. As we wake up, this consciousness functions in different parts of the personality, and we work. We're our normal selves. The body, senses, and mind function. Prana becomes vigorous, and everything goes on as usual. And we don't think about the peace that we need every day in deep sleep. We don't think about going back home every day and leaving this ego and the world behind. We don't think about that as the source of our existence. So we get glimmers of the highest truth if we think about it calmly. And what good does it do us? It doesn't get us enlightenment. We may not be able to perceive, experience the Atman in samadhi. That's the end game. But we can be intellectually aware of this truth. And it's extremely helpful. One should have this faith first, that one is really pure spirit, immortal and free. Simply because we're not aware of this truth, we identify this with ourselves with body and mind. And that is the cause of all our troubles and bondages. A person should first of all know what she really is, and with this self-faith, she should work in this world. Now, when Swamiji said that person is an atheist, the old religion said that the person is an atheist who doesn't believe in God, and the new religion says that person is an atheist who doesn't believe in himself. I was very confused about this for many years, because when it's written in the books, the new religion says that he is an atheist who doesn't believe in himself. The essence self is small, not large. But what he's really saying is that Atma Shraddha, faith in the Atma, constitutes religion now. He's bringing Advaita out of the forest and spreading it in the marketplace, in the world. So strength doesn't come from outside of us. Moral teachings can't help us very much unless we've got something in there to meet them. We have to have the capacity to get the inspiration from moral teachings. Otherwise, the words fall flat. And we won't be benefited by spiritual teachings either unless we're ready to some extent for them. We have to have the power of understanding ready to receive them and understand them. Then these moral and spiritual teachings will help. So the power by which we develop does not actually come from outside. It's within us. The development of any living organism means the unfoldment of those inner potentialities. External objects help, that's all, but the cause of growth is within. So a person should believe there was one source of strength in him or her, and that source is not the body or the senses, not even the vital principle, the prana. It's not in the mind, but in the immortal, pure, self-luminous experience, the radiance of which enables the body to function, the senses to function, and the mind to operate. It's the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, the life of life, the mind of mind, as it says in the Katha Upanishad. So here's the source of faith. Here's the source of strength to be aware of your true nature and to hold to that knowledge with great faith. And we'll close with Vivekananda. The ideal of faith in ourselves is of the greatest help to us. If faith in ourselves had been more extensively taught and practiced, I'm sure that a very large portion of the evils and misery that we have in this world would have vanished. All the difference between one person and another is owing to the existence or non-existence of faith in himself. The old religion said he was an atheist who didn't believe in God. The new religion says he's the atheist who does not believe in himself. But it isn't selfish faith. Because in Vedanta is the doctrine of oneness. It means faith in all. Because you are all. Love for yourself means love for all. Love for animals, love for everything. For you are all one. It is that great faith which will make the world better. I'm sure of it. Therefore, you must not say you're weak. How do you know what possibilities lie behind that degradation of the surface? You know but little of that which is within. For behind you, is the ocean of infinite power and blessedness. So, is there time for questions? Good. Okay.
Have half-hour break? Yeah. So we have to be quick. Because, no, you don't have to clap. That meant quick. Yeah, for everybody to get a cup of tea or coffee and a snack and do it within a half hour and get back here is going to be a trick. So anyhow, let's try to do our best so that we don't miss out on the next program. We'll start with our panel discussions in half an hour.